For those of you guys who are new to the channel, every year around this time, I make a video talking about who I feel will be the biggest sleeper team heading into the upcoming NFL season. I've done this for over the last 3 years. Back in 2018, my biggest sleeper team was the Baltimore Ravens. 2019, the Buffalo Bills. Last season, it was the Denver Broncos. And this year, my biggest sleeper team heading into the 2021 NFL season are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, originally, my pick was the Los Angeles Chargers. But I just feel like so many people are sleeping on Pittsburgh, overlooking Pittsburgh, and underrating Pittsburgh, all for the fact that they feel like Pittsburgh's schedule is too tough to the point that they can't even have a winning record. There are a lot of people out there who believe that the Steelers are going to have their first losing season in a very long time. And what caused me to make this video was I was going on Instagram. I already made that mistake. I went on my Explore page and I saw this Instagram profile that was doing his record predictions. Now, normally I ignore these because I don't like to get, amped up. But I saw his record prediction for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he had the Pittsburgh Steelers going 5-12. And he basically said that the Steelers need to tank and try to draft the franchise quarterback within the top 3 picks of the 2022 NFL draft. And from me reading that remark, it just irritated me. Because I feel like telling the Steelers to tank and rebuild goes against everything that the Steelers are as a franchise. The Steelers are the model of consistency. Like, the Steelers are one of the most consistent franchises, not only in the NFL, but in sports. They're well ran. They have a good front office. They have a good head coach in Mike Tomlin, one of the best in the game. And they have a really good roster. A better roster than what a lot of people out there are giving them credit for. The Steelers do not tank, and they don't rebuild. They retool. Great franchises in the NFL don't rebuild, and they don't tank. The Pittsburgh Steelers' opportunity to tank for a future successor to Big Ben passed. They had that opportunity back in 2019 when Ben Roethlisberger missed the majority of the year with an elbow injury. And when everybody asked Mike Tomlin the question back in 2019, were the Steelers just going to go ahead and give up on the season? Mike Tomlin said no. As long as he remains the head coach in Pittsburgh, this team was going to try to win every game. And what did Mike Tomlin and the Steelers front office do to back up those remarks? Well, they give up their first round selection in the trade for Minka Fitzpatrick. The New England Patriots last year had an opportunity to just give up on the season and tank for a quarterback. Did they? No, they competed. Same thing with the Dallas Cowboys. The best organizations in the NFL simply do not give up on the year. They compete. They try to win every single game. And when you look at the Steelers, I don't care how tough the schedule is. The Steelers are a good team. There's no way I can look at this Steelers team and say that this team cannot beat some of the best teams in the NFL. I look at this Steelers team and I say there's no way the Steelers finish last in the AFC North. I look at this Steelers team and I say no way they get swept by the Ravens or the Browns. I look at this Steelers team and I say this is a team that can compete with the best teams in the NFL on any given Sunday. And I'm not making your little cliche motivational pep talk about how any NFL team can lose any given NFL Sunday. I'm not making that. I strongly look at this Steelers roster, and this is a roster that is definitely capable of being able to keep up and win games against some of the best teams in the NFL. I find it hard to believe, looking at this roster and looking at the coaching staff, with Mike Tomlin being one of the best head coaches in the NFL, that the Steelers simply are not going to be able to beat any good team this year, and that the Steelers are going to have a losing record. People think just because the schedule is tough, that means you should just automatically count out the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that is dumb thinking, and I think it's lazy reasoning and explanation. How about you guys, instead of criticizing how tough the Steelers schedule is, and you go ahead and you look at this team, and you look at the depth. People talk about how the Steelers lost Steven Nelson, but nobody talks about what went behind Steven Nelson getting released. Steven Nelson asked for a trade, well, poorly, because it was told to him that he probably was going to have to compete for his starting job during training camp, and he wasn't on board with that, so he asked for a trade. He couldn't get traded because nobody wanted to trade for him, and he got released. The Steelers have a lot of great young talent at cornerback. As a matter of fact, the Steelers have a lot of depth at corner. You're looking at Justin Lane, who's going to end up being the replacement for Steven Nelson. And you're going to end up having Cam Sutton, that's the guy who ends up playing slot corner, replacing Mike Hilton, who signed with the Cincinnati Bengals for free agency. I'm not worried about cornerback one bit for Pittsburgh. As a matter of fact, it helps us out because now we get even younger at the position. Okay? Then you look at the two safeties, and Minka Fitzpatrick, we know he's amongst one of the best in the NFL. But you also have Terrell Edmonds, who is coming off the best season of his career last year in 2020. You also have Vince Williams, who's still on the team. You got Devin Bush, who's coming back. He got his season cut short last year. Then you look at one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. You look at Cam Hayward. You look at Stephon Tuitt, who had a career year. He should have been a Pro Bowler last year. You still have TJ Watt amongst one of the best defensive players in all of the NFL. Probably the second best defensive player in the NFL behind Aaron Donald. Then you look at the offense. Everybody's talking about, well, JT, Big Ben has regressed. Big Ben has not regressed as bad as what a lot of you guys make it out to be. Ben Roethlisberger led the NFL in pass attempts last year, throwing the ball 41 times per game. He had several games where he had to throw the ball for 50 times. With no run game, a lackluster offensive line due to injuries, and a wide receiver core that had 44 drop passes and 7 drop touchdowns. So can somebody explain to me, how is Ben Roethlisberger responsible for the Steelers wide receivers having a combined total of 44 drop passes and 7 drop touchdowns? That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I understand Ben Roethlisberger has some really bad games, but the guy is 39 years old. Your quarterback at 39 years old should not be asked to have to carry a team. So how did the Steelers improve this? Well, they go ahead and they draft Najee Harris. Najee Harris is the closest thing I've ever seen to Le'Veon Bell. He is going to be a stud. He's going to be a very big focal point of this offense. You look at the offensive line. The offensive line has the misconception that a lot of people have out there that it's bad. This is not a bad offensive line. And I'm not saying this because I'm just this delusional Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Steelers fans are actually not only one of the best fan bases out there, but they're also one of the most realistic fan bases out there. Remember around this time last year when guys like Colin Cowherd had the nerve to go on national television and say that the Steelers were going to be terrible, they weren't going to make it to the playoffs? And what happened? The Steelers went to the playoffs, and not only did they go to the playoffs, but they also won the division. He said the roster was too old and needed to get younger. And it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Because when you look at the Steelers, this young offensive line, yes, it's young, but it's still really talented. The only question mark for the Steelers' offensive line is left tackle. Your two guard positions are secured. Kevin Dotson had a really good rookie season last year. You also have David DeCastro, who is still one of the best offensive guards in the NFL. You're going to have rookie Kendrick Green out of Illinois, who most likely should be starting at center. Right tackle is going to be Matt Bonner. As long as he's able to stay healthy, he's going to be able to be pretty solid. So this offensive line is not bad. 4 out of 5 positions are pretty much set in stone. Left tackle is the only major concern for Pittsburgh. You also bring in a new offensive line coach, which should help out a lot. Like, the Steelers did a lot of changes in the offseason to make sure that this offense didn't replicate the performance that it had in the second half of last year. You have a new offensive coordinator in Matt Canada. And you want to know what blows me? Everybody for all these teams that have new coaching staff like the Detroit Lions or the LA Chargers, when they're doing their predictions, they say, well, you want to play them later. You don't really want to play them late in the season. You want to play them early and things like that. But even then, you don't want to play them early because you don't really know what to expect. So the Steelers get a new offensive coordinator, but yet teams shouldn't want to play us early because they don't know what to expect from Matt Canada's offense. I don't really understand that philosophy there. Like, everybody makes this excuse, you don't know what to expect when you get a new coaching staff, but I've yet to see everybody say, well, you don't want to play the Steelers early, at least offensively, because they're going to have a new offensive coordinator. Their offensive philosophy is going to be different. Does really make a lot of sense to me. The Steelers are trying to evolutionize on the offense. They're trying to have a more modern offense. They're trying to get away from the old traditional offense, which is something that people have been clamoring for the Steelers to do for years. Like, you look at the wide receivers. This is one of the best receiving corps in all of the NFL when they know how to catch the ball. You got Deontay Johnson, who was like top 5 in drops last season. I strongly believe that he should be able to improve his consistency when it comes to catching the football. If he ends up being able to be better catching the football this year than what he was last year, he probably should go over to 100 yards. You look at Chase Claypool, we don't really need to say too much about Chase Claypool. We saw what Chase Claypool did when the Steelers actually got him involved. As a matter of fact, he was the second best rookie wide receiver at one point behind Justin Jefferson. You got James Washington. You still got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's still looking for a big contract. You got Pat Freiermuth, rookie tight end out of Penn State. You still got Eric Ebron. He's pretty good when he knows how to catch the ball as well. Like, this is a Steelers team that has way too much talent to have their first losing season in years. And Steeler fans are not delusional. They're not overly optimistic. Last year when everybody was bashing the Steelers, Steeler fans weren't saying, no Steeler fan out there was saying that the Steelers were going to win the Super Bowl. Everybody's expectation was 10-6, 11-5, at least make it to the wild card. That was it. The Steelers actually exceeded the majority of the fan base's expectations last year by not only winning the division, but by having the record that they did. You see, I don't know why people try to act like great franchises have to decline. A great franchise can't be great forever. Everybody has to try to predict who is going to fall off, who's going to fall off the cliff. And as a realistic Steeler fan, I look at this team as not being there to be bad enough to be picking in the top 5. And I definitely don't expect them to have a losing record. I don't care how tough the schedule is. You have one of the best head coaches in the NFL. I'm pretty sure Mike Tomlin is going to have this team ready to play against amongst some of the best teams in the league this upcoming season. I think it's kind of dumb and lazy as an argument to say the Steelers are not going to be good because their schedule is tough. So if that's the case, then every team in the NFL pretty much should just give up on the season because everybody plays a pretty tough schedule. It's just that the Steelers have to play more teams to a more playoff caliber. And I strongly don't believe that the Steelers will get swept by Baltimore or get swept by the Cleveland Browns because nobody knows the Steelers better than the Baltimore Ravens, and nobody knows the Baltimore Ravens better than Pittsburgh. Lamar Jackson has had some of his worst performances of his career against Pittsburgh. Cleveland is probably going to split with Pittsburgh this year. Cincinnati, they could end up still in the game on Pittsburgh. This division is just really good, really tough. But there's no way you're going to come on here and try to make it seem like the Steelers need to tank because this roster is not that bad. A lot of you guys just are not familiar with the new faces. When there's a lot of new faces, that oftentimes comes with a lot of unfamiliarity. But at the same time, that's why you guys don't see me out here doing record predictions in May and June. I actually try to take a little bit more time, try to preview every position for all 32 NFL teams so I can get to know every team's roster better just in case I walk over a couple of sleepers. Because there are a lot of people who just look at the depth chart And you look at this guy and you're like, oh, who's Justin Lane? Oh, I don't know him, so the Steelers are just going to have a drop-off in production in that position. Instead of actually taking time to research, read some articles on who's going to be the guys to be stepping up and filling those roles. Example, for Seattle, everybody says that the Seattle Seahawks don't have any good corners. I disagree with that. It took a couple of extra minutes, but they actually have a pretty good group of cornerbacks on the roster. It's just that nobody really knows how good those guys are because they're not household names. There are a lot of guys on the Steelers roster that a lot of people in the NFL world don't know, so they just assume that, okay, they have such and such who I never heard of playing cornerback. They're going to be terrible at that position. Like, really. Everybody just looks at the depth chart and they go on the overall consensus of what the media is saying instead of going in, taking some time to look up a couple of guys' names and actually research some facts before they just come out here and just say the Steelers are going to be terrible. The Steelers are not going to be the worst team in the AFC North. They're not going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And quite frankly, I think this team is more than capable of being able to prove everybody wrong and being a dark horse Super Bowl contender. Literally. And even if the Steelers don't make it to the Super Bowl, that's not my expectation. My expectation for the Steelers this year is to at least win 9 to 10 games. 10 games should be, the medium. 9 games, worst case scenario. And you can make the argument that the Steelers have this tough schedule, but the Steelers have the roster and the coaching staff that should be able to compete with any team on any given Sunday. And I just don't understand why people think the Steelers are just going to lose to every good team they play. People automatically think the Steelers are going to lose to Buffalo, the Raiders, the Broncos, the Chargers, the Seahawks, the Ravens twice, the Browns twice. Like, dang. So you just tell me the Steelers roster is just so terrible that they can't beat 4 or 5 good teams? They beat a couple of good teams last year. You beat Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. You beat Tennessee. You beat the Browns. You beat 3 playoff teams last year. Yes, you lost to 2 other playoff teams in Buffalo, and you also lost to the Washington football team. But even then, you can't win them all. But yet everybody just wants to count out the Pittsburgh Steelers because their schedule is tough. I think that's a lame excuse, and I think it's a pretty pathetic excuse. How about we go ahead and look at the roster and actually compare the rosters that the Steelers has to other teams? How about we look at the coaching staff? Good coaches, majority of times, are going to be able to win against good teams. Bill Belichick was able to win a couple of games against some good teams last season. Like, I don't understand how people just look at this roster for Pittsburgh and they try to tell you that this is the worst roster in the NFL. I don't understand how people try to tell you that Ben Roethlisberger is the reason why the Steelers won't make it to the playoffs, even though he was the best player on offense, threw the ball more than any other quarterback per game in the NFL, and had a wide receiving core that had 44 drop passes and 7 drop touchdowns. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You bring in Najee Harris. You also have Alex Highsmith. People are talking about Bud Dupree being gone. Newsflash, Bud Dupree was out for half of last year. His season got cut short, and the Steelers still had one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. The Steelers have had a top 5 pass rush for like over the last 6-7 years. The Steelers have been top 5 in sacks. The Steelers have had more sacks in a game. Well, the Steelers have broken the record for most games consecutively with a sack. Pass rush should never be a question in Pittsburgh. It doesn't matter if you use Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree was a good player, but newsflash, the Steelers went a whole half a season without him. Alex Highsmith is going to be a stud. James Pierre, a cornerback that a lot of people don't know about, is going to be good enough that he can end up being one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL right away. James Pierre is going to become a household name. Justin Lane, Cam Sutton, guys who are really good who just haven't had the opportunity to shine. But a lot of you guys, you just look at the depth chart and you go by names, but nobody really takes a couple of minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, because everybody's lazy and whatnot, the research, the backups, research the positions of questions and actually try to figure out just how good the guys replacing guys who left are actually going to be. Everybody just looks at these assumptions. Everybody goes off names. Everybody's going off names, and that's the reason why a lot of people are underestimating the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. The Steelers are going to make it to the playoffs this year. And I don't care. Yes, I'm talking to you, Juice. If you don't believe the Steelers are one of the 7 best teams in the AFC, I don't care. They're going to make it to the playoffs. It doesn't matter if the Steelers have a hard schedule. It doesn't matter if they have the toughest schedule in the NFL. There's no way you can tell me, looking at this roster, the Steelers are just going to lay down, roll over, and get smashed with no condiment, no Vaseline, and they're just going to drop dead, and they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. There's no way you're going to try to convince me that the Steelers can't beat at least 4 or 5 of the best teams in the NFL this year. The standard in Pittsburgh is never going to change. Mike Tomlin is considered a top 5 head coach in the NFL, and this roster definitely isn't one of the worst in the NFL. And the Steelers definitely are not the worst team in the division. I love you, Cincinnati Bengals fans. You guys know I do. But the Steelers are the biggest sleeper team heading into the upcoming 2021 NFL season.